The coffee went cold in his hand. Han Sok-jin stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his Manhattan penthouse office, watching the sun bleed into the skyline, and felt nothing. 7 months of nothing. He had become a machine that wore expensive suits and signed documents and broke men who stood in his way. But inside, he was hollow, gutted, the kind of empty that no amount of power or money could fill. His reflection stared back at him from the glass, and he barely recognized the man looking back. 40 floors below, the city pulsed with life. People laughed, people loved, people existed in ways he had forgotten how to do. He raised the coffee cup to his lips and stopped. A flicker of movement in the glass caught his eye. Not outside. Inside, reflected from the security monitor mounted on the wall behind his desk. He turned slowly, his brain struggling to process what his eyes were showing him. The surveillance feed from the building's service level, a camera he had never paid attention to before, was displaying a woman in a gray cleaning uniform. Her back to the camera, her body curved protectively around a belly so swollen it made his breath catch. She was mopping a hallway, her movements careful and deliberate, one hand pressed to her lower back. Dark curls escaped from beneath a maintenance cap, brown skin gleamed under the fluorescent lights. And even though he couldn't see her face, even though 7 months had passed and the world had convinced him she was gone forever, his body knew before his mind did. It was her. Welcome to Ruthless Romance Tales. And honey, you just stepped into something you can't unsee. If you've been riding with me, you know we don't do safe here. We do dangerous. We do addictive. We do the kind of love that brands your soul and refuses to let go. And if you're new, buckle up, because what you're about to witness is a collision so violent, so inevitable, it'll rewrite everything you thought you knew about romance. Hit that like button like your life depends on it, subscribe because you're already hooked, and smash that notification bell, because missing what comes next would be a crime. Now let's watch how the Mafia boss's life changes forever. The coffee cup shattered against the marble floor. Sok-jin was already moving, his phone forgotten on the desk. The billion-dollar contracts scattered across his workspace suddenly meaningless. He yanked open his office door so hard it cracked against the wall, startling his assistant, who jumped to her feet. "Mr. Han, your 3 o'clock is..." He didn't hear the rest. He was running, something he hadn't done since he was a child, his polished shoes skidding on the marble as he hit the emergency stairwell. 7 months. 7 months he had torn apart soul looking for her. 7 months he had burned through contacts and favors and threats. 7 months he had destroyed anyone who might have known where she went. And she had been here, in his building, 40 floors beneath him, invisible, scrubbing floors in the parts of the structure where people like him never went. His heart was a fist in his chest, pounding so hard it hurt. The stairwell blurred past him, level after level, his breath coming in ragged gasps that had nothing to do with exertion, and everything to do with the terror clawing at his throat. What if he had seen it wrong? What if his desperate mind had conjured her from nothing? A ghost made of grief. What if he got down there and she was gone again, vanished like smoke, like she had never existed at all? He hit the service-level door with his shoulder, bursting into a hallway that smelled like chemicals and desperation. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. He spun, disoriented, trying to remember which camera feed he had seen, which corridor, there. At the end of the hall, her back still to him, she stood frozen in front of a maintenance supervisor who had her backed against a wall. The mop and bucket lay toppled beside her. Her hands were raised, not in surrender, but in protection, cradling her belly. The supervisor was talking, his voice low and threatening, too quiet for Sok-jin to make out the words from this distance. But he saw the way Lillian's body was coiled tight, ready to fight or flee. He saw the way her chest rose and fell too quickly. He saw the way she was scanning the hallway for an escape route that didn't exist. And something primal and violent woke up inside him. "Step away from her." His voice cut through the hallway like a blade. Both figures spun toward him. The supervisor's face went pale, but it was Lillian's reaction that destroyed him. She looked at him, and instead of relief, instead of the recognition he had dreamed about for 7 months, her expression crumbled into something worse than fear. It was resignation, like she had been waiting for this moment, like she had known he would come, like she had expected it to end exactly this way. "No," she whispered, and the word was so broken it barely had sound. "Not you. Please, not you." Sok-jin felt his world fracture. Not you. Like he was the threat. Like he was the danger she had been hiding from. "Lillian, what?" The supervisor moved. Fast. Too fast for someone who was supposed to be maintenance staff. He grabbed Lillian's wrist and yanked her against him. producing a switchblade from somewhere in his uniform, the edge pressed to the soft skin of her throat. "Don't move, mister." "Han." The voice was wrong. Too cultured. Too familiar. "Don't even breathe wrong, or I open her throat, and you watch your air bleed out on this dirty floor." Time stopped. Seokjin's brain cataloged details at lightning speed. The shoes, Italian leather, obscenely expensive. The watch visible beneath the uniform cuff, a Patek Philippe he had given as a bonus 2 years ago. The way the man held the knife, professional, trained. The posture of someone used to command. Recognition slammed into him like a freight train. Kangdae, his underboss, his father's chosen successor. The man who had stood beside him at his father's funeral 4 months ago and promised loyalty until death. Kangdae smiled, and it was the smile of a man who had already won. Surprise. Lillian made a small, wounded sound. Her eyes locked on Seokjin's, and in them, he saw the terrible weight of betrayal. She thought he knew. She thought he had sent Kangdae. She thought this was all part of some elaborate punishment, some game he was playing. "I didn't know." The words ripped from his throat. "Lillian, I swear to God, I didn't know." Kangdae laughed. "Of course you didn't. You were too busy playing empire builder in New York while I cleaned up your father's mess back home. He wanted her gone. Wanted you to learn what happens when you bring disgrace into the family. I simply made the arrangements. My father's dead, true. But by then, I realized she was actually useful. Turns out your little accountant girlfriend noticed some irregularities in the books before you sent her away. Embezzlement is such an ugly word, don't you think? So I kept her close, kept her quiet, kept her exactly where I could watch her." He pressed the blade harder, and a thin line of blood appeared on Lillian's throat, until she started asking questions again, started being nosy. "So now, we end it." Seokjin's hand moved toward his weapon. Kangdae clucked his tongue. "Don't! You're good, Seokjin, but you're not faster than me cutting. And even if you were, do you really want to risk your child?" The words hung in the air, poisonous and true. Seokjin's hand stopped. Kangdae grinned. "That's what I thought. Now, you're going to let me walk out of here. You're going to wait exactly 5 minutes. And then you can have what's left of her. Deal?" But Kangdae made a mistake. He shifted his weight, preparing to move. And for just a fraction of a second, the blade eased away from Lillian's throat. She moved. Not away from the knife, but into it, dropping her weight and slamming her elbow backward into Kangdae's ribs with a force that came from 7 months of rage. He grunted, his grip loosening, and she tore away from him, stumbling toward Seokjin. Kangdae lunged after her, the knife flashing in the fluorescent light. Seokjin fired. The sound was deafening in the narrow hallway. The bullet caught Kangdae in the shoulder, spinning him around, the knife clattering to the floor. He went down hard, gasping, clutching the wound. But Seokjin didn't see him fall. He saw only Lillian, stumbling, her momentum carrying her forward, her foot catching on the overturned mop bucket. He moved, diving to catch her. But he was too far away, too slow. She hit the ground on her side with a sound that would haunt him forever. A wet, heavy impact that drove the air from her lungs. For a moment, she just lay there, stunned. Then her face contorted, and she screamed. It was a sound that didn't belong in the human register, pure animal agony that echoed off the concrete walls. Seokjin dropped beside her, his hands shaking, terrified to touch her. "Lillian, look at me, look at me." Her eyes found his, but they were unfocused, drowning in pain. "Something's wrong," she gasped. "The baby! Seokjin, I can't." Blood began to spread beneath her, dark and damning against the pale concrete. And Han Seokjin, who had faced down warlords and politicians and men twice his size without flinching, who had built an empire on fear and will, felt something inside him shatter into pieces so small he would never find them all again. He gathered her into his arms, his suit soaking through with her blood, and he screamed for help with a desperation that stripped away every layer of control he had ever built. Security came running, paramedics materialized, radios crackled, but all he could hear was her breathing, too fast and too shallow, and the terrible silence where their child's movements should have been. As they loaded her onto a stretcher, as the chaos swallowed them whole, Lillian's hand found his and squeezed once, weakly. "Why didn't you come sooner?" she whispered, and Seokjin had no answer. Because the truth was worse than anything Kangdae could have done. He had been 40 floors above her, drinking cold coffee and feeling sorry for himself, while she had been down here, alone and pregnant and terrified, believing he had abandoned her, believing he wanted her gone. The ambulance doors closed between them, and for the second time in 7 months, Han Sok-jin watched Lillian disappear from his life, not knowing if he would ever see her alive again. Now, let me tell you how we got here, because this isn't just a story about a reunion. This is about two people who built something real in a world designed to destroy them. About the 7 months that tested whether love could survive when everything else burned away, and about the moment when staying apart became more dangerous than coming together. 12 months ago, everything was different. 12 months ago, Han Sok-jin didn't believe in fate. He believed in leverage, in strategy, in the cold mathematics of power that his father had drilled into him since he was old enough to understand that their family name meant something in the shadows where real business happened. He believed that every person had a price, every loyalty could be bought, and love was just another word for weakness that got men killed. Then Lillian Smith walked into his sole office on a Tuesday morning in September, and every single thing he believed began to crack. She wasn't supposed to be there. The accounting firm had sent their senior partner, some gray-haired man with 30 years of experience laundering numbers for people who needed their books to tell prettier stories than the truth. But the senior partner had food poisoning, and they had sent her instead. Their newest hire, 26 years old, American, black, wearing a navy pantsuit that was professional but not expensive, carrying a laptop bag that had seen better days, her natural curls pulled back in a bun that was already losing its battle with the soul humidity. She walked into the conference room where Sok-jin sat with his father and 3 underbosses, and she didn't flinch. Most people flinched. Most people took one look at Han Dae-jung, at the way his silence filled a room like poison gas, and they remembered urgent appointments elsewhere. But Lillian just set down her bag, opened her laptop, and said, "Gentlemen, let's talk about your tax exposure." Her voice was steady, professional, completely unimpressed. Sok-jin's father leaned back in his chair, a predator assessing prey. "We were expecting Richard. Richard's currently intimate with his toilet bowl. You get me instead." She pulled up a spreadsheet. "I've reviewed your filings for the last 3 years. We have some problems." Kangdae, sitting to Sok-jin's left, made a sound low in his throat. "Problems?" Lillian's eyes flicked to him, then away, dismissive. "Your shell companies in the Caymans are structured inefficiently. You're paying 18% more in corporate tax than you need to. Your real estate holdings in Busan are classified wrong, and whoever did your quarterly reports last year should be fired and possibly arrested for incompetence." The room went silent. No one talked to Han Dae-jung like that. No one walked into their world and called them stupid, even politely. Sok-jin waited for his father to end the meeting, to have her escorted out, to make an example that would remind everyone why you didn't disrespect the Han family. Instead, his father smiled. It was not a kind smile. "Fix it." Lillian looked up from her laptop, meeting his father's gaze without blinking. "That's why I'm here." For the next 6 hours, she tore apart their financial structure and rebuilt it. She asked questions that made Kangdae sweat. She found money they had forgotten existed. She restructured their holdings with a ruthlessness that impressed even Sok-jin's father, who impressed approximately never. And through it all, Sok-jin watched her, not just her work, though that was fascinating in its own right. He watched the way she chewed her bottom lip when she was thinking, the way she twisted a pen between her fingers during the rare moments she had to wait for a file to load, the way her accent softened certain words and sharpened others, marking her as foreign in a country that didn't always welcome foreigners kindly. When the meeting finally ended, when his father and the underbosses filed out, Sok-jin stayed. Lillian was packing her laptop, her movements efficient. "You're not afraid of us," he said. It wasn't a question. She paused, her hands stilling on her bag. Then she looked at him, really looked at him, and something in her expression made his chest tighten. "Should I be?" Her voice was quiet now, without the armor of professionalism. Just a woman asking an honest question. "Most people are. I'm not most people." She zipped her bag. "And fear makes you sloppy." "I don't do sloppy." She headed for the door, and Sok-jin found himself moving before he made the conscious decision to do so, his hand catching the door before she could open it. She was close now, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something light and citrus that had nothing to do with trying to impress anyone. Close enough to see the gold flecks in her dark brown eyes, close enough to realize she was holding her breath. "Have dinner with me." The words came out before he could stop them. Her eyebrows rose. "Is that an order?" "It's a request. From a client. From a man." The distinction mattered. He needed her to understand it mattered. She studied his face, and he had the unsettling sensation of being read, assessed, measured against some internal standard he couldn't see. Finally, she smiled. It was small, cautious, but real. One dinner, somewhere public, somewhere with witnesses. Smart. She was so goddamn smart. Deal. That night, in a restaurant where the lighting was soft and the tables were far enough apart for privacy without intimacy, Sok-jin learned that Lillian Smith had grown up in Brooklyn, that she had put herself through college and graduate school working 3 jobs, that she liked mystery novels and hated action movies because the plots never made sense, that she had come to Seoul on a 2-year contract because she wanted to see the world before she settled into the kind of life where adventure died quietly in suburban routine. He told her almost nothing. Old habits. In his world, information was currency, and personal details were weapons waiting to be used against you. But he listened. And somewhere between the appetizers and dessert, something happened that Sok-jin didn't have a name for. It wasn't love, not yet. It was interest, curiosity, the sense that this woman, who had no reason to care about him beyond a professional transaction, was someone he wanted to know. Someone who made the hollow places inside him ache with the possibility of being filled. When he dropped her off at her apartment building in Gangnam, she hesitated before getting out of the car. "This was nice," she said. "It was, but I'm not sleeping with a client, just so we're clear. Direct, honest, refreshing." "Understood." She opened the door, then looked back. "If you want to see me again, it can't be about work. It has to be real. Real." He didn't know if he remembered how to do real, but looking at her, at the way the streetlight caught in her hair and the careful hope in her expression, he wanted to try. "Next Saturday, I'll show you Seoul, the parts tourists don't see." Is that a promise or a threat? Both. She laughed, and the sound did something dangerous to his carefully constructed defenses. He watched her disappear into her building, and for the first time in his adult life, Han Sok-jin felt something that terrified him more than any enemy ever had. He felt hope. By day, Lillian restructured the Han family's financial empire with surgical precision. She found inefficiencies, closed loopholes, saved them millions. His father grudgingly approved of her work, though he made it clear she was a tool, not a person. Kang Dae watched her with suspicion, asking questions about her background, her loyalty, her intentions. By night, Sok-jin showed her Seoul. Not the tourist version, the Han River at sunset, street food markets in Myeongdong, hiking trails in Bukhansan where the city disappeared and only mountains remained. He took her to hole-in-the-wall restaurants his driver knew, where the owners greeted him with respect but not fear. Places where he could almost pretend to be normal. She told him about her childhood, her mother who had died when she was 12, her father who had worked himself to death to pay for her education, her younger sister Maya, still in New York, still depending on her to send money home. He told her about his mother, how she had died when he was 8, leaving him alone with a father who viewed love as liability, how he had been trained from childhood to take over the family business, to be harder than his enemies, to never show weakness. "What do you want?" she asked him one night, as they sat on a bench overlooking the city lights. "What do you mean?" "Not what your father wants, not what the business needs. What does Han Sok-jin want?" No one had ever asked him that question. He didn't have an answer. She waited, her hand finding his in the darkness between them. It was the first time they had touched beyond polite handshakes and accidental brushes. "I don't know," he admitted finally. "I've never thought about it. Then maybe it's time to start." They were having dinner at his penthouse. She had finally agreed to be alone with him, though she had texted her location to 3 friends and made him promise not to try anything Mafia-ish. They were laughing about a terrible movie she had made him watch when he kissed her. It wasn't planned. It wasn't strategic. It was just a moment where the space between them became unbearable, and he closed it. She kissed him back, soft at first, then deeper, her hands sliding up to tangle in his hair. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she looked at him with wide eyes. "I need to tell you something," she said. His heart stopped. This was where she would say she was leaving, going back to New York, that this had been fun but it couldn't be real. "I'm falling in love with you." Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. "And I need to know if that's going to destroy me. Because in my experience, loving people who live in your world doesn't end well." Seok-jin had spent his entire life learning to hide emotion, to control every reaction, to never show vulnerability. But looking at her, at the courage it took to say those words knowing what he was, something broke open inside him. "It terrifies me," he said quietly. "The thought of you loving me. Because everyone I've ever loved has died or been taken from me. And the thought of losing you." His voice cracked. "I don't know if I would survive it." Then don't lose me. She cupped his face in her hands. Choose me. Choose this. Choose something real, instead of the empire your father wants you to inherit. I don't know how. Then learn. We'll figure it out together. They made love that night. Slowly, carefully, like they were both afraid of breaking something precious. Afterward, she fell asleep in his arms, her breath warm against his chest, and Sok-jin lay awake staring at the ceiling, feeling something he had thought was beaten out of him years ago, hope. His father found out. Not about the relationship. Sok-jin had been careful, kept their time together private, never let them be seen publicly as more than professional associates. But Han Dae-jung had eyes everywhere. Kang Dae reported that Sok-jin's behavior had changed, that he was distracted, softer. You're sleeping with the American. His father's voice was flat. They were in his study, just the two of them. A room where beatings and lectures had shaped Sok-jin's childhood. There was no point lying. Yes, end it. No. His father stood slowly. At 65, he was still a formidable man, broad-shouldered, iron-spined, with eyes that had watched men die without blinking. That was not a request. I'm not a child anymore. Sok-jin's voice was steady. I've done everything you asked, taken over the businesses you wanted, made the deals you demanded, but this is mine. Nothing is yours. His father's voice was ice. Everything you have, I gave you. Everything you are, I made you. And I will not watch you throw away everything I built for some foreign woman who will leave you the moment she realizes what you really are. She already knows what I am. Then she's stupid or desperate. Either way, she's a liability. Sok-jin met his father's gaze without flinching. If you touch her, if you do anything to hurt her, I will burn everything you've built to the ground, and then I'll disappear where you'll never find me. The threat hung in the air between them. His father's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Calculation. Reassessment. You would choose her over your family. She is my family. His father turned away, looking out the window at the Seoul skyline, a kingdom he had built through blood and fear. You're weak, he said finally. Just like your mother. Love made her weak, and it killed her. It will kill you too. Maybe. Sok-jin stood. But at least I'll have lived first. He walked out, and he didn't look back. He asked her to marry him on a Tuesday. No ring, no plan. Just a moment where the thought of not being tied to her forever became unbearable. They were in her apartment, cooking dinner together, or rather, she was cooking while he sat at the counter and watched, useless with anything that didn't involve spreadsheets or violence. Marry me, he said. She looked up from the vegetables she was chopping, her expression startled. What? Marry me. Not someday. Now. This week. Sok-jin, I know it's insane. I know we've only been together a few months. I know I come with complications that would make most sane people run screaming. He came around the counter, taking her hands carefully, because she was still holding a knife. But I also know that every morning I wake up and you're not there feels wrong, that I would rather have 1 year with you than a lifetime of the emptiness I had before. So marry me. Please. She set down the knife. Her hands were shaking. Your father will never accept this. I don't care. He'll try to destroy me. I'll protect you. You can't promise that. Her voice broke. People like your father always win. They always find a way to take what matters most. Then we make sure there's nothing he can use against us. We get married quietly. City Hall. Just us. He can't destroy what he doesn't know exists. She laughed, but it came out wet. She was crying. A secret marriage. Very romantic. I'll give you romance later. Right now I'm giving you everything I am and hoping it's enough. She kissed him. Hard. Desperately. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright with tears. And something fiercer. Yes, damn you, yes. They married 3 days later at Seoul City Hall. No guests. No family. Just 2 witnesses pulled from the hallway and a bored clerk who processed the paperwork with the enthusiasm of someone filing tax returns. Lillian wore a simple white dress she had bought that morning. Seok-jin wore a dark suit. They exchanged plain gold bands, nothing expensive, nothing that would draw attention. When the clerk pronounced them married, Sok-jin kissed his wife and felt the last piece of the wall around his heart crumble to dust. They spent their wedding night in a small hotel in Bukchon, away from his penthouse, away from anywhere his father's people might see them. They made love slowly, carefully, like they were memorizing each other. And afterward, as she slept curled against him, Sok-jin made a silent promise. He would keep her safe, no matter what it cost, no matter who he had to become. Lillian discovered she was pregnant on a Wednesday morning. She took 3 tests, all positive, and sat on the bathroom floor of her apartment, staring at them with a mixture of terror and wonder. She told him that evening, They were at his penthouse. She had been staying there more and more, though she still maintained her apartment as cover. "I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air between them. Sok-jin was at his desk, reviewing contracts. He looked up, certain he had misheard. "You're..." "About 6 weeks. I went to the doctor today to confirm. It's early, but it's real." He stood slowly, the contracts forgotten. "How do you feel?" "Terrified." Her laugh was shaky. "Your father already hates me. This is going to make everything worse. Or it changes everything." He crossed to her, pulling her into his arms. "A child. Our child." He pressed his hand to her still flat stomach, and something fierce and protective woke up in his chest. "He's a grandfather now. He'll have to accept." "He won't." She looked up at him, and there was fear in her eyes he'd never seen before. "Sok-jin, we need to think about this. Really think. Can we raise a child in your world? Will they be safe? Will I? I'll make sure of it." "How?" He didn't have an answer. Because she was right. His father would see this as the ultimate betrayal. A heir born to a woman he considered beneath them. A mixed child who would dilute the bloodline. "We'll figure it out," he said finally. "Together, like we always do." But even as he held her, even as he felt the fragile beginning of life between them, a cold certainty settled in his gut. This was going to end badly. The only question was how much he could save when it all came crashing down. His father found out about the marriage first. Kang-dae had been following Lillian. Sok-jin discovered this later, too late to matter. He had seen them together at the hotel. Had noticed the rings they wore only when they were alone. Had put the pieces together and reported back. Han Dae-jung waited until Sok-jin was in New York on business. Then he made his move. Lillian was working from home, reviewing financial documents, when Kang-dae showed up at her apartment with 2 men. "Mr. Han would like to see you." She knew better than to go. Texted Sok-jin immediately. "Something's wrong. Kang-dae is here." But Kang-dae took her phone. Escorted her not violently, but firmly to a car. Drove her to the Han family estate where his father waited. "You married my son." Han Dae-jung sat behind his desk like a judge pronouncing sentence. "You carried his child, all while lying to me about the nature of your relationship." "We didn't lie. We kept it private. There's a difference. Do not presume to correct me in my own home." His voice could have frozen blood. "You are a complication. A foreign woman with no family worth mentioning, no connections that matter, no value beyond the temporary skills you bring. And now you've trapped my son with a pregnancy." "I didn't trap anyone. He asked me to marry him. Because you made him weak. Filled his head with romantic nonsense about love and partnership." He leaned forward. "My son is meant for great things. To lead this family into the next generation. He cannot do that with you dragging him down. He loves me. Love." The word was poison on his tongue. Love is what destroyed his mother. Made her weak. Made her betrayable. She died because she loved the wrong person. I will not watch my son make the same mistake. Fear, real and cold, slid down Lillian's spine. "What are you going to do?" "Give you a choice. Leave Seoul. Disappear. File for divorce. Claim the child isn't his. I will pay you enough money to live comfortably for the rest of your life. Or refuse, and watch everything you care about burn, starting with your sister in New York." The threat was clear. Lillian's hands moved instinctively to her belly. 12 weeks now, barely showing, but real. So terribly real. "He'll come looking for me." "Let him. By the time he finds you, if he finds you, you'll have told him yourself that you want nothing to do with him, that this was all a mistake." "I won't do that. Then your sister Maya, such a sweet girl, working as a teacher in Brooklyn, will have a terrible accident. These things happen in dangerous cities." The room spun. Lillian gripped the arm of the chair to stay upright. "You're a monster. I'm a father protecting my son from his own weakness." He pushed papers across the desk. "Divorce documents. Sign them. And instructions for where you'll go, what you'll do, how you'll disappear. And if I refuse, then people you love start dying, and you'll sign anyway, but with their blood on your hands." She signed. Hands shaking, tears streaming down her face, she signed. Kang-dae watched with cold satisfaction. "I'll handle the arrangements. She'll be gone by tonight." But Han Dae-jung wasn't finished. "One more thing. My son will try to find you. We'll tear apart the world looking. So you'll leave him a message, a video, telling him that you're leaving, that you never loved him, that the child isn't his, that this was all a mistake. I won't. You will. Or Maya dies tonight instead of living to see tomorrow." So Lillian recorded it. Numb, broken, reading from a script Kang-dae provided, saying words that tasted like ash and poison, saying she had married him for money, for security, that she was leaving with someone else, that the baby wasn't his, that he should forget she ever existed. When it was done, she vomited in the bathroom. Then Kang Dae took her to a company apartment, not homeless, but close. A studio in a part of Seoul where people didn't ask questions, where people like her became invisible. "You'll work for us," he said. "Cleaning crew, low level, we'll pay minimum wage, just enough to survive. And if you try to contact him, if you try to run, your sister dies. Understand?" She understood. Seok-jin returned from New York 2 days later to find his apartment empty. Lillian's things gone. Her phone disconnected. Her company email deactivated. He went to his father's estate, rage making him shake. "What did you do?" His father played the video. Seok-jin watched his wife, his Lillian, say words that couldn't possibly be true. Watched her face as she claimed she had never loved him. Watched her destroy everything they had built. "She left you," his father said simply. "As they all do eventually. You're lucky it happened now, before you wasted more time on her. This is fake. You threatened her. I gave her money and opportunity to leave. She took it. That tells you everything you need to know about her character. I don't believe you. Then search for her. Waste your time and resources. You won't find her. And eventually you'll realize I was right. That love is weakness. That family, real family, blood family is all that matters." Seok-jin searched. For 7 months, he searched, hired investigators, called in favors, tore through Seoul looking for any trace of her. He found nothing. It was like she had evaporated from existence. His father had made sure of that. And Kang Dae, who had helped orchestrate everything, who had kept Lillian trapped and hidden and working 40 floors below where Seok-jin lived and worked in New York, watched and waited. Because Kang Dae had been stealing, embezzling millions from the Han family accounts, and Lillian, in her months of working for the company, had noticed discrepancies, had asked questions, had become a liability. Keeping her close, keeping her silent, keeping her believing that Seok-jin had abandoned her, that was the perfect solution. She couldn't expose the embezzlement without exposing herself. And if she died in some accident, well, these things happen to invisible people all the time. But Kang Dae had made one mistake. He had kept her alive. Present day, 40 floors below where it all began, Lillian Smith had learned to make herself invisible. It was a skill she had perfected over 7 months of scrubbing floors in the building, where she once walked through the front entrance in tailored suits, carrying leather briefcases, her name on business cards that meant something. Now she wore gray. She kept her head down. She moved through the service corridors like a ghost, and most days, that was enough. Most days, no one looked at her twice. Most days, she survived. Today was not most days. The supervisor had been watching her for weeks. She felt his eyes tracking her movements, lingering on her swollen belly, calculating something she couldn't quite name but knew in her bones was dangerous. She had tried switching shifts, tried working different floors, but the building was his territory, and there was nowhere to hide. When he cornered her in the supply hallway during the afternoon shift change, when everyone else was either clocking out or too far away to hear, Lillian knew the careful balance she had maintained was about to shatter. "You've been asking questions." His voice was casual, conversational, but his body blocked the only exit. "About payroll discrepancies. About missing inventory. About things that aren't your concern." Lillian kept her voice steady, her hands resting on her belly where the baby was kicking, restless. "I haven't asked anything. I just do my job." He stepped closer. Too close. The smell of his aftershave was overwhelming in the narrow space. "See? That's the problem. You're too good at your job. Too observant. Too smart for someone who's supposed to be cleaning toilets and forgetting she ever had ambitions." Her heart was pounding, but she forced herself to meet his eyes. 7 months ago, she would have backed down. 7 months ago, she had believed what they told her, that she was worthless, that Seok-jin had wanted her gone, that she deserved this exile. But 7 months of carrying a child had changed something fundamental inside her. She had become steel wrapped in exhausted flesh. "I need this job. I'm not causing trouble." He smiled, and it was the smile of a man who had already decided how this would end. Too late for that. His hand shot out, gripping her wrist hard enough to bruise, yanking her toward him. Lillian's other hand instinctively moved to protect her belly, and he used her off-balance momentum to slam her against the concrete wall. Pain exploded through her shoulder. The baby kicked frantically, sensing her distress. "You're going to disappear," he said quietly, his face inches from hers. "Quietly. Tonight. And if you're smart, You'll run far enough that no one ever finds you. Terror flooded through her, cold and sharp. But underneath it, something else rose. Something feral and fierce that had been building for 7 months of humiliation and fear. No. The word came out stronger than she expected. His grip tightened. What did you say? Lillian's free hand found the mop handle leaning against the wall behind her. In one smooth motion, born of pure survival instinct, she swung it up between them, driving the wooden end into his stomach. He grunted, his grip loosening just enough. She wrenched free, stumbling backward, bringing the mop handle up like a weapon. Stay back. Her voice shook, but her hands were steady. I don't care if you fire me. You won't touch my child. For a moment, they stood frozen in a tableau of violence waiting to happen. Then the service elevator dinged. The doors slid open, and a shadow stepped out, tall and dark and radiating something that made the air itself feel like it was holding its breath. Lillian's eyes went to the figure, and her entire world stopped. She knew that silhouette, knew the way he moved, knew him in ways that made her chest ache with a grief she thought she had learned to carry. Han Sok-jin had found her. Sok-jin had imagined this moment 1,000 different ways. In some versions, she ran to him. In others, she slapped him. In the darkest ones, she was already gone, dead in some unnamed place, and he spent the rest of his life hunting ghosts. But he had never imagined this. Her, pregnant and cornered, holding a broken mop handle like a sword, looking at him like he was the monster in her nightmares. The supervisor spun toward him, and Sok-jin's brain cataloged the details with cold precision. The expensive watch, the Italian shoes, the way he moved with military efficiency. Kangdae, his father's golden boy, his most trusted underboss. Mr. Han. Kangdae's voice was smooth, unruffled. This is unexpected. Sok-jin's weapon was already drawn, aimed center mass. Step away from her. But Lillian made a sound, something broken and raw, and when Sok-jin's eyes flicked to her, what he saw there nearly brought him to his knees. She wasn't relieved. She was terrified. Of him. You sent him, she whispered, her voice cracking. After all this time, you finally sent someone to finish it. The words made no sense. Finish what? He took a step toward her, hand extended, weapon lowering. Lillian, I don't understand. I didn't send anyone. I've been looking for you for 7 months. I thought you were... She flinched away from his outstretched hand, and the movement cost her her balance. She stumbled, the mop handle clattering to the floor. Kangdae moved like lightning, catching her before Sok-jin could close the distance, spinning her around and pressing the edge of a switchblade to her throat, time fractured. Sok-jin saw the thin line of red appear on her skin, saw the way her hands moved instinctively to cradle her belly, saw the resignation in her eyes, like she had been expecting this ending all along. Don't. His voice came out strangled. Kangdae, don't do this. Kangdae smiled, and it was the smile of a man who held all the cards. You know, I didn't think you'd figure it out this fast. Thought I'd have at least another few hours to clean up this mess. He pressed the blade harder, and Lillian made a small, wounded sound that drove spikes through Sok-jin's chest. But here we are. Why? Sok-jin kept his weapon trained, but his hands were shaking. He couldn't risk the shot, not with Lillian in the line of fire, not with his child pressed against a blade. Why do this? Kangdae laughed. Your father wanted her gone, said she was a stain on the family honor, an American, black, common. He gave me very specific instructions about making her disappear after you refused to do it yourself. The words were bullets, each one finding its target. My father's dead. He's been dead for 4 months. True. But by then, I'd realized she was more useful alive. Your little accountant noticed things she shouldn't have. Money moving in ways that didn't match the books. So I kept her close. Kept her scared. Kept her believing you wanted her erased. Kangdae's eyes gleamed. Turns out embezzlement is easier when the only person smart enough to catch it thinks she's already lost everything. Sok-jin's mind was racing, connecting pieces, the missing funds, the quarterly reports that hadn't made sense, the way Kangdae had been so helpful after his father's death, so eager to take on more responsibility. How much did you take? 43 million, give or take. Kangdae shrugged. Would have been clean too if she hadn't started asking questions again last week. Some people just can't help themselves. Lillian's eyes met Sok-jin's across the space between them. In them, he saw the terrible weight of 7 months of lies. 7 months of believing he had abandoned her. 7 months of surviving alone in the belly of his own building, while he searched the world for her. I'm sorry, he said, and the words felt pathetically inadequate. Lillian, I swear I didn't know. Her lips moved, forming words he couldn't hear. Then Kangdae shifted his weight, preparing to move, and the blade eased away from her throat for just a fraction of a second. Lillian drove her elbow backward into his ribs with everything she had. Everything happened in the space between heartbeats. Kangdae's grip loosened. Lillian tore free, stumbling toward Seokjin. Kangdae lunged after her, the blade flashing under fluorescent lights. Seokjin fired. The gunshot was deafening in the narrow corridor, the sound bouncing off concrete walls like thunder. The bullet caught Kangdae in the shoulder, spinning him sideways. He hit the wall hard, the knife clattering across the floor, his hand clutching the wound as blood seeped between his fingers. But Seokjin wasn't watching him fall. His eyes were locked on Lillian, on the way her momentum carried her forward, her foot catching on the overturned mop bucket. He moved, diving to catch her, but the distance was too great, the angle wrong. She hit the ground hard, landing on her side with a sound that would echo in his nightmares forever. For 3 seconds, she didn't move, didn't breathe, just lay there, stunned, her eyes wide and unfocused. Then the pain hit. Her scream tore through the hallway, raw and primal, the kind of sound that came from somewhere deeper than lungs or throat. It came from the soul. Seokjin dropped beside her, his hands hovering over her body, terrified to touch her, terrified not to. Lillian, look at me. Tell me where it hurts. Her hands were pressed to her belly, her face contorted. The baby. She gasped. Something's wrong. Seokjin, I can't feel. She couldn't finish. Another wave of pain crashed over her, and she curled into herself, keening. Blood began to pool beneath her on the concrete. Dark. Too much. Too fast. Seokjin's training. All the years of keeping calm under pressure, of making calculated decisions in life or death situations, evaporated like smoke. He was just a man, watching the woman he loved bleed out in a service hallway that smelled like bleach and desperation. Security! His voice cracked. Desperate. I need a medic. Now. Footsteps thundered toward them. Radios crackled. His security team materialized, their faces pale as they took in the scene. Behind them, Kangdae was moving. Clutching his wounded shoulder, he staggered toward the fire exit, leaving a trail of blood. Stop him. Seokjin shouted, but his men were frozen, caught between protecting their boss and pursuing the threat. Kangdae slammed through the exit door, and it crashed shut behind him. 2 of Seokjin's men broke away to follow. But Seokjin's attention was already back on Lillian. Ambulance is 3 minutes out, one of his men said, but 3 minutes might as well have been 3 hours. Seokjin gathered Lillian into his arms, cradling her against his chest. She was shaking, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. Stay with me, he whispered against her hair. Please, Lillian, just stay with me. Her hand found his, gripping with surprising strength. Why didn't you come sooner? The question was barely audible, but it cut deeper than any blade. I didn't know where you were. I looked everywhere. I swear to God, I looked everywhere. His voice broke. I'm so sorry. I'm so goddamn sorry. She closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. He told me you signed the papers, that you paid him to make me disappear, that you never wanted the baby. Each word was a knife in his chest. He lied. Lillian, he lied about everything. He pressed his forehead to hers, his own tears falling freely now. I never stopped looking. Not for one single day. The paramedics arrived in a chaos of movement and urgent voices. They tried to take her from his arms, but his grip tightened reflexively. Sir, we need to assess her. You have to let go. One of them, a woman with kind eyes, touched his shoulder gently. Let us help her. Please. It took everything in him to release her, to watch them lay her on the stretcher, to see the way they moved with controlled urgency that told him this was bad. Worse than bad. Critical. As they lifted the stretcher, Lillian's eyes found his one more time. Don't leave me, she whispered. It wasn't a request. It was a plea from someone who had been left too many times already. Seokjin grabbed her hand. Never again. I promise you, never again. The ambulance doors closed, and he climbed in beside her, his suit ruined with her blood, his hands shaking, his entire world balanced on the edge of a knife. One of his security team approached the ambulance before it pulled away. Boss, Kangdae got away. We lost him in the subway tunnels. He's wounded badly, though. He won't get far. Seokjin's jaw tightened. Find him. I don't care what it takes. Find him. Then the ambulance lurched forward, and all thoughts of vengeance disappeared in the face of keeping Lillian alive. The ambulance ride lasted 7 minutes that felt like 7 lifetimes. Lillian drifted in and out of consciousness, her grip on Sok-jin's hand alternating between crushing and slack. The paramedics worked with mechanical efficiency, checking vitals, inserting IVs, their faces carefully neutral in the way medical professionals learn to mask fear. Sok-jin watched the monitor above her head, watched the numbers that meant nothing to him but everything to the woman struggling on the stretcher. Blood pressure's dropping, one paramedic said quietly to the other. We need to move faster. The driver didn't respond with words, just pressed harder on the accelerator. Sok-jin felt the ambulance surge forward, weaving through Manhattan traffic with sirens screaming. Lillian's eyes fluttered open, finding his face. The baby, she whispered. Is the baby? Her voice broke. She couldn't finish the question because she was terrified of the answer. He squeezed her hand, trying to pour every ounce of strength he had into that touch. They're doing everything they can. Just hold on. Please, just hold on. I tried to protect him. Tears streamed down her temples into her hair. For 7 months, I did everything right. I took the vitamins. I ate properly, even when I had nothing. I worked myself to exhaustion to keep us alive. And now, a sob tore through her. Now I'm losing him because I couldn't just stay down, couldn't just be invisible. The words shattered something in Sok-jin's chest. She thought this was her fault. After everything Kang Dae had done, everything his father had orchestrated, she believed she had failed. This isn't on you. His voice was fierce. None of this is on you. You survived 7 months in hell. You protected our child when the entire world was trying to break you. You fought back when you had every reason to give up. You're the strongest person I've ever known. She turned her face away, fresh tears falling. Your father was right. I don't belong in your world. Don't. The word came out sharper than he intended. Don't you dare finish that sentence. My father was a bitter, cruel man who measured worth in bloodlines and power. He was wrong about everything that mattered. The ambulance lurched to a stop. The back doors flew open, and suddenly there were more people, more urgent voices, a flurry of movement as they transferred Lillian to a hospital gurney. Sok-jin tried to follow, but a nurse blocked his path. Sir, you can't go back there. We need space to work. He looked past her to where they were wheeling Lillian through double doors, her hand reaching back toward him, her face pale as death. That's my wife. That's my child. I understand, but... He pulled out his phone with shaking hands, made a single call. 30 seconds later, the hospital administrator appeared, flushed and nervous. Mr. Han. Of course. Right this way. The nurse's face went carefully blank as she stepped aside. Money opened doors, even emergency protocols tried to keep closed. They led him to a private waiting room with leather chairs and abstract art that was supposed to be calming. It only made the sterile emptiness worse. A doctor appeared, still in street clothes, clearly pulled from home. Mr. Han, I'm Dr. Sarah Mitchell. I'll be overseeing your wife's care. She sat across from him, her expression grave. The fall caused significant trauma. Her blood pressure is dangerously high, and we're seeing signs of placental abruption. The baby's heart rate is dropping. Sok-jin's world narrowed to a pinpoint. What does that mean? It means we need to operate immediately. Emergency C-section. She paused, and in that pause, he heard everything she wasn't saying. Mr. Han, I need you to understand the situation. Your wife is 29 weeks pregnant. The baby's chances improve every day we can wait, but we're out of time. And given her condition, there are risks. Significant risks. What kind of risks? His voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. Dr. Mitchell met his eyes with the brutal honesty of someone who had delivered this speech before. We might not be able to save them both. The question hung in the air like a death sentence. If you have to choose, Doctor, Mitchell said quietly, we need to know your preference now. Minutes matter. Seok-jin stared at her, his brain refusing to process what she was asking. Choose. Between Lillian and his child. Between the woman who had survived 7 months of hell and the baby who had never drawn a single breath. Between his past and his future. Between two pieces of his soul. I can't. The words came out broken. I can't make that choice. Dr. Mitchell's expression softened with something that might have been pity. Mr. Han, I understand this is impossible, but if we get into that operating room and her pressure spikes, if she starts hemorrhaging, if the baby goes into distress, we won't have time to find you and ask. We need a decision now. Sok-jin stood, pacing to the window that overlooked the city. 40 floors below, people were living normal lives, going to dinner, watching movies, not being asked to choose which person they loved got to live. Save her. His voice was barely a whisper. "If it comes to that, save Lillian." He turned back to face the doctor, and his eyes were hollow. "I can't lose her again. Do you understand? I can't survive that." Dr. Mitchell nodded slowly. "I'll do everything in my power to save them both. You have my word." She stood, heading for the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, Mr. Han. She's a fighter. I've seen her vitals. Most women would have gone into shock by now. She's still fighting." The door closed behind her, and Seok-jin was alone with the weight of what he had just done. He had chosen Lillian. If it came down to it, he had condemned his own child. The rational part of his brain knew it was the only choice. Lillian was here, real, the woman he loved. The baby was a possibility, a future that might never exist. But the irrational part, the part that had spent 7 months imagining what his child would look like, whether they would have Lillian's eyes or his stubborn chin, that part was screaming that he was a monster. Hours passed. He didn't sit, didn't eat, didn't do anything but wear a path in the expensive carpet and wait for news that felt like it would never come. His phone buzzed incessantly. His security team, his lawyers, business partners wondering why he had walked out of a meeting. He ignored all of it. None of it mattered. Nothing mattered except the woman fighting for her life 3 floors above him. Finally, the door opened. Dr. Mitchell stood there, still in surgical scrubs, her mask pulled down. Her face was exhausted. Seok-jin's heart stopped. He couldn't read her expression, couldn't tell if she was about to deliver hope or devastation. "Mr. Han," she stepped into the room. "Your wife is stable. The surgery was complicated, but she's breathing on her own. Her pressure is coming down. She's going to survive." The relief was so overwhelming he had to grip the back of a chair to stay upright. "And the baby?" Dr. Mitchell's expression shifted into something softer. "You have a son. 2 pounds, 6 ounces. 29 weeks is early, very early, but he's breathing with assistance. He's in the NICU. It's going to be a long road, Mr. Han. The next 72 hours are critical. But right now, in this moment, he's alive." A son. He had a son. Seok-jin's knees gave out. He sank into the chair, his hands covering his face, and for the first time since he was a child, he wept. Not silent tears. Deep, wrenching sobs that came from a place he hadn't known still existed inside him. Dr. Mitchell placed a hand on his shoulder. "Would you like to see your wife?" He nodded, unable to speak. She led him through corridors that smelled like antiseptic and hope, to a recovery room where Lillian lay connected to machines that beeped softly in the dimness. Her eyes were closed. Her face was gray with exhaustion, but her chest rose and fell with steady breaths. Seok-jin approached the bed like he was walking on sacred ground. He took her hand gently, careful of the IV. "Lillian." Her eyes fluttered open. Unfocused at first, then sharpening as they found his face. "The baby," she whispered hoarsely. "Tell me." "We have a son. He's small, but he's fighting, just like his mother." A single tear rolled down her cheek. Then she turned her face away from him. The silence in the hospital room was heavier than any words could have been. Seok-jin stood beside Lillian's bed, still holding her hand, feeling the warmth of her skin against his palm, but the distance between them stretched wider than the 7 months they had been apart. She was alive. Their son was alive. He should have felt relief, gratitude, something other than this hollow ache in his chest. "Lillian, please, look at me." She kept her face turned toward the window, toward the city lights blurring through her tears. "I can't do this." Her voice was so quiet he had to lean closer to hear. "I can't live in a world where my child gets hurt because of who his father is. That won't happen again. I swear to you. You can't promise that." She finally turned to face him, and the devastation in her eyes nearly broke him. "Your father started this. Kang-dae continued it for 7 months, even after your father died 3 months ago. How many others are there, Seok-jin? How many other people in your organization see me and our son as weaknesses to exploit, as leverage to use against you?" The timeline hit him like a freight train. His father had been alive for the first 4 months of Lillian's disappearance, had died while she was still trapped, still suffering, and Kang-dae had simply carried on the torture, using it to cover his own crimes. "My father orchestrated your disappearance," Seok-jin said quietly, the words tasting like ash. "But Kang-dae kept you there for himself. After my father died, he could have released you. Instead, he used you as a shield for his embezzlement." She closed her eyes, fresh tears spilling. "It doesn't matter who started it. What matters is that it happened, that your world made it possible." He had no answer, because she was right. In his world, love was a vulnerability. Family was a target. The moment people knew what mattered to him, they would use it to destroy him. I'll fix this. I'll make changes. How? The word came out sharp, almost angry. You can't change what you are, what your family built. This empire of yours. It's made of blood and fear and secrets. Our son deserves better than growing up in the shadow of that. Seokjin released her hand, stepping back. His jaw was tight, his eyes burning. What are you saying? She closed her eyes again. I'm saying I don't know if I can trust you. Even knowing the truth, I can't forget what it felt like to be invisible in your world. To believe you had thrown me away. The words were a blade between his ribs. He turned away from her, his hands clenching into fists. For 7 months, he had imagined finding her. In every scenario, she had come back to him. They had rebuilt what was broken. But he had never imagined this, her looking at him like he was the monster who had destroyed her life. He walked to his jacket, draped over a chair, and pulled something from the inner pocket. A black leather book, worn at the edges, secured with a small lock. He placed it on the table beside her bed. What is that? Her voice was wary. My father's ledger. Every transaction, every bribe, every illegal operation the Han family has run for the last 30 years. Names, dates, amounts, everything. He met her eyes. Proof that could put me in prison for life. Proof that could dismantle everything my family built. Lillian stared at the book like it might explode. Why are you showing me this? Because you're right. You can't trust me, not based on words or promises. So I'm giving you the power to destroy me. He pushed the book closer to her. If you want me gone, give this to the FBI. I'll go to prison. You and our son will be free. Safe. Away from my world. Her hand trembled as she reached toward the ledger, then stopped. This is manipulation. You're trying to make me feel guilty. No. His voice was raw. I'm trying to show you that you have a choice. Real power, not the illusion of it. I'm putting my life in your hands because I don't know any other way to prove that I meant every word I ever said to you. What words? We barely had 3 months together before everything fell apart. She was right. They had been a beginning, not a story. A spark, not a fire. 3 months of dinners and conversations and falling into something that felt like it could become love, given time. But time had been stolen from them. Then let me tell you now. He pulled a chair close to her bed, sitting so their eyes were level. I love you. I have loved you since the day you walked into my office and called my father's accounting incompetent. I love the way you fight even when the world tells you to surrender. I love that our son is going to have your strength and your mind, and I will spend the rest of my life proving that you can trust me, or I will spend it in prison knowing you're safe. Either way, the choice is yours. Lillian looked at the ledger. At him. At the impossible decision he had placed in her lap. Where are you going? She asked as he stood. To finish what Kang Dae started. To make sure no one else in my organization ever thinks they can touch you again. His phone buzzed. A text from his security team. Found him. Red Hook Docks. Warehouse 7. Moving now. He walked toward the door. Behind him, he heard her whisper. Don't die. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. Kang Dae had made it to the docks, but he was dying. Seokjin's security team had tracked him through the subway system, following the trail of blood that marked his desperate flight. The bullet had done more damage than Seokjin realized. Kang Dae had lost too much blood, moved too far on adrenaline and desperation alone. By the time he reached the warehouse in Red Hook, he was barely conscious, propped against a shipping container, his makeshift bandage soaked through. This was where deals were made in the language of violence, where men who broke the rules came to disappear. Kang Dae had called in every favor, reached out to every contact, but no one was coming. Word had already spread through the underworld. Han Seokjin was hunting, and no one wanted to be caught in the crossfire. Seokjin entered through the front door. No stealth, no strategy. Just a man walking into hell with nothing left to lose. The warehouse was dimly lit, shadows pooling between stacks of containers. He found Kang Dae exactly where his team said he would be. Slumped, pale, dying slowly. Kang Dae's eyes flicked up as Seokjin approached, and he laughed. It came out wet, painful. Come to finish it? Seokjin stood over him, weapon holstered. He didn't need it. Kang Dae was no threat anymore. Why? The question had haunted him through the entire drive here. Why keep her there after my father died? You could have let her go. Disappeared with the money. Started over. Kang Dae coughed, blood flecking his lips. She noticed the discrepancies. Before everything fell apart, she was reviewing the books, asking questions. Your father's death gave me the perfect excuse to keep her silent, keep her afraid, keep her exactly where I could watch her and make sure she never talked. He smiled through the pain, worked perfectly until she started getting nosy again last week. Where's the money? Seokjin's voice was flat, emotionless. Kangdae gestured weakly to a container behind him. In there, 43 million. Everything I took. Everything I earned cleaning up your father's messes. He looked up at Seokjin with dimming eyes. You going to kill me? Make it look like an accident? Seokjin studied him. This man who had tortured Lillian, who had stolen from his family, who had used his father's prejudice as a shield for his own crimes. 7 months ago, he would have killed him without hesitation. But 7 months ago, he hadn't held his son, hadn't watched Lillian fight for their lives. No. He pulled out his phone, made a call. I'm going to let you rot in prison for the rest of your life. Kangdae's expression shifted to confusion, then fear. What? The FBI has been investigating the Han family for years. Never quite had enough evidence. Seokjin pulled open the container door. Inside were bricks of cash, neatly stacked. Until now, your money, your warehouse, your fingerprints all over everything. He pulled out a lighter, and Kangdae's eyes went wide. No, you can't. Seokjin flicked the lighter, tossing it onto the money. The flames caught instantly, spreading with hungry efficiency. You wanted the kingdom? Here's the ashes. He stepped back as the fire roared to life. Smoke billowing into the warehouse. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. I called them before I came in. Anonymous tip. They'll find you here, wounded, surrounded by burning evidence. They'll find the ledgers you kept, the records of every transaction. You're insane, Kangdae gasped. You're implicating yourself. No, I'm setting myself free. Seokjin turned toward the exit. My father's ledger is already with the FBI. I made the call 2 hours ago. Cooperating witness. Immunity in exchange for testimony against everyone else. Your name was first on the list. The betrayal in Kangdae's eyes was absolute. You're destroying everything your father built. Good. Seokjin paused at the doorway. He built it on suffering, on people like Lillian being crushed under the weight of his ambition. I'm done carrying that forward. You think you can just walk away? Become someone new? Kangdae's laugh was bitter. You think she'll forgive you? I don't know. Seokjin looked back one final time. But I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to deserve it. He walked out into the night as police cars screamed into the parking lot. He raised his hands, showing he was unarmed, and let them cuff him. Protocol. He had called this in. They would process him, verify his immunity deal, and release him. Inside the warehouse, Kangdae screamed as the flames grew higher, and the police moved in to extract him. The money burned. The empire burned. And Han Seokjin walked away from the ashes, ready to build something new. When Seokjin returned to the hospital, dawn was breaking over Manhattan. He was covered in smoke and ash, his hands blackened, his clothes ruined. He stopped outside Lillian's room, suddenly terrified to open the door, terrified of what he might find. Or not find. He pushed the door open slowly. The room was dim, early morning light filtering through the blinds. Lillian was awake, sitting up slightly in bed, staring at the black ledger on the table beside her. She had opened it. Pages were spread across her lap, filled with his father's meticulous handwriting. Names, numbers, crimes that stretched back decades. She looked up as he entered, and her eyes moved over him, cataloging the damage. You're alive. It wasn't quite relief in her voice, more like observation. I am. He moved closer, his gaze dropping to the ledger. Have you decided? She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the edge of a page. Your father was a meticulous record keeper. Every transaction documented, every person bought, every threat made. She looked up at him. Did you know about all of this? Some of it, not all. He kept his secrets, even from me. Lillian nodded slowly, then did something he didn't expect. She picked up the pages, carefully stacked them back into the ledger, and closed it. From somewhere in her bedding, she produced a book of matches. Hospital policy violation, but somehow fitting. What are you doing? His voice was hoarse. She struck a match, holding it over the ledger. I'm not giving this to the FBI. The match touched the leather cover, and flames began to curl across the surface. She dropped it into the metal trash bin beside her bed, watching it burn. I don't want you in prison, Seokjin. I want you here, being a father, learning how to be a man our son can be proud of. She met his eyes. and he saw the steel there, the strength that had kept her alive through 7 months of hell. But the old life dies with that book, the illegal operations, the violence, the empire your father built. It ends now. He dropped to his knees beside her bed, his head bowing. I don't know how to be anything else. Then learn. Her hand moved to his hair, fingers threading through it gently. I spent 7 months learning how to survive as someone I never thought I'd be. You can spend the next 7 learning how to build instead of destroy. He looked up at her, and she saw the vulnerability there. The fear. What if I fail? What if I can't protect you without that world? Then we fail together. She pulled his face up, forcing him to meet her gaze. But we do it as a family. Not as a mafia boss and his mistress. As partners. As equals. As 2 people who choose each other every single day. The tears came again, but this time they weren't born of grief. They were something else. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. I don't deserve you. Probably not. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. But you're stuck with me anyway. He kissed her then, gentle and reverent, tasting salt and smoke and the promise of something new. When he pulled back, her eyes were wet too. Our son needs a name. The words were soft. An offering, an olive branch, a beginning. 6 months later, the world looked different. The estate in the Hamptons sat on 12 acres of protected land, surrounded by walls that were high enough for security but designed to look like garden boundaries rather than fortifications. Inside, the house was filled with light. Floor-to-ceiling windows, soft colors. A nursery painted in shades of blue and cream, filled with toys and books and all the normal things that normal families had. Han Sok-jin stood on the balcony, holding his son against his chest. Daniel. They had named him Daniel, after Lillian's grandfather. 6 months old now. Still small. Still catching up from his early arrival. But strong. Stubborn. With his mother's eyes and his father's determination, Lillian stepped onto the balcony, wrapping her arms around Sok-jin from behind, resting her chin on his shoulder. She was wearing jeans and a soft sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. No uniform. No fear. Just a woman standing in her home, holding her family. He's asleep, Sok-jin whispered. Finally. Good. Maybe we can eat dinner while it's still hot for once. She smiled against his shoulder. Below them, the security team did their patrols, but they were discreet. Professional, no weapons visible, just men doing a job. Seok-jin's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out one-handed, careful not to disturb Daniel. A message from his lawyer. The reorganization of Han Industries was complete. Every illegal operation dissolved or legitimized. Every questionable contract terminated. The empire his father built had been dismantled brick by brick and rebuilt into something that could stand in the light. It had cost him half his wealth, 3/4 of his power, and it was worth every penny. He looked at the message, then at the woman beside him, then at the sleeping child in his arms. What are you thinking? Lillian asked quietly. Sok-jin smiled. It felt strange on his face, unfamiliar but genuine. I'm thinking about the text I never want to receive again. The phone call I never want to make. The moment I almost lost everything because I was too blind to see what mattered. And now? Now I see perfectly. He turned, kissing her temple, holding his family close as the sun set over the water. Now I know exactly what I'm fighting for. Lillian's phone chimed. She pulled it out, laughing softly at the screen. What? Sok-jin asked. She showed him. A text from her sister Maya. Dinner's ready. Stop being romantic on the balcony and come eat before I feed your portion to the dog. They went inside together, leaving the old ghosts on the balcony to fade with the dying light. Inside was warmth, laughter, family, the sound of silverware on plates and normal conversation about normal things. This was the fortress they had built. Not made of walls or weapons, but of choice, of forgiveness, of 2 people who had frozen when they found each other, then melted to keep each other. And in the nursery, above Daniel's crib, hung a single frame. Inside was a photograph from 12 months ago, Lillian in a navy pantsuit, standing in a Seoul office, holding a laptop and looking at the camera with challenge in her eyes. Beside it, written in Sok-jin's handwriting, the day everything changed, the end. If this story grabbed you by the heart and didn't let go, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Share this with someone who needs to believe that love can survive anything, even the darkness we create ourselves. Drop a comment telling me what moment hit you hardest, because your stories fuel mine. And remember, at Ruthless Romance Tales, we don't do simple, we do complicated, we do real, we do the kind of love that rewrites your soul. Until next time, stay dangerous.